Good evening, guys. Hopefully you can hear me. Testing. Don't know what is up with my internet at the moment. Hope everyone's doing well today. I think it's time to chuck my embed onto the WoW head page. Let's go ahead and do that. And then we'll check to see if it's all working fine. How's it going, Cargoza? Thanks for stopping by today. Okay, that's working. Let's mute and play. Bingo bango. Awesome. Well, I think we're in action now. Is that working? That's working. Perfect. So, welcome everybody to my Saturday live broadcast. The WoW Economy Weekly Wrap-Up has just been published on wowhead.com. Every week I have an article covering the week that was in the gold making community, and I try and cover topics that are interesting for people to catch up on, information to investigate if you may have missed it, or just cool little guides or little tidbits of facts and stuff for new gold makers and new goblins to get started with their gold making. How's everybody doing in the chat today? Mr. Max, Billis, Saku, Mr. Honkit, Alazara. Hope everybody's doing well today. I'm going to start off my segment here at the start of the stream, just talking through this week's blog. A few different topics that I'm covering this week. Mostly some Battle for Azeroth alpha data mining, which could have some major implications on how professions are being done in BFA. So we'll go ahead and get started. So this is the 32nd edition of the WoW Economy Weekly Wrap-Up. Time is certainly flying. We're going to be checking out some of the data mine stuff. As I said, there's a nice little guide from the WoW Economy subreddit discussing getting started out on low population servers, and cool video from Sharkin regarding the conundrum of whether to use a recipe or to sell it. And a couple of videos from Trax Gaming and Samadan Play as well, covering a few different auction house strategies we're going to take a quick look into. So, for anybody who is unfamiliar with who I am, my name is Gumdrops. I'm the lead moderator for the WoW Economy subreddit and the accompanying Discord server, which we just crossed over 20,000 members. We're actually closer to 22,000 members now. Had a massive giveaway celebrating that last week, covered in last week's article. Here's to reaching 25,000 very soon. I'm also the support manager and user evangelist for Trade Skill Master, the auction house add-on suite, and as I say, the weekly wrap-up for the WoW Economy covers and showcases some interesting topics and discussions. Within the community over the last week, so some of it you might have missed if you're already in the community, or if you're just getting started, would like to join in. There's some good info for further reading and stuff. So I'm going to field some questions after the first segment here, which is the alpha data mining. Something I missed in last week's edition was the new scrapper, kind of an evolution of the Obliterum Forge. It was discovered and posted about on Wowhead. It's a new tool that's in the crafting area of Zuldazar, and it gives you this attunement buff called Scrapper Attunement, and when you're attuned to the scrapper you can scrap items without confirmation. And what this means is you can break down crafted items into their component parts for a percentage of the items that you get, or the items that are required to make the item. You get half of it back on average, which is some data that's been discovered there.
Potential customer.
So the scrapper implies that you can destroy items rather than disenchant them or obliterate them, and instead of getting a new item like Obliterum system in Legion, you just basically get whatever you turned into the crafted item, including some of the materials, but also, very interestingly, you get the new version of Blood of Sargeras, which is called Expulsum, which I discovered on somebody's live stream who was testing out the alpha, which could have some major implications on how you can scale up and utilize professions in the next expansion. So some speculation that I posted on the subreddit this week. It's not quite clear whether the items made available right now to test a scrapper require some Expulsum to create them, but I'm thinking that if you can craft, or if you can scrap any crafted item, and any player can scrap any crafted item, you can kind of evolve the current shuffling process in Legion into a much greater scale regarding being able to acquire Expulsum on any character instead of having to require Blood of Sargeras generating professions like enchanting or skinning, and pairing those with blood hungry professions like jewel crafting, etc. And you won't actually be gated on how many bloods you can acquire in a short space of time. You can just chuck all of these crafted items into the scrapper and hopefully generate some Expulsum. So this is kind of like some middle ground between what it used to be like in Warlords of Draenor, where you could convert all of your Draenor materials into the traders and the garrisons in order to receive the primal spirits, and you could just mass produce all of your daily cooldown materials. Somewhere between that and kind of somewhere between Obliterum Forge, but like on steroids basically. So it's not just creating a new item to sell, you're just being able to mass produce all these crafted items. So yeah, as I say, it's kind of an evolution of the current shuffle, whereby in Legion you're taking the Shaldori Silk or the Stonehide Leather, you're making bracers with rank 3 recipes, and then converting them into enchanting materials. From there you can either sell the enchanting materials, or you can make enchants with them, or you can sell the enchants, or you can make Obliterum out of the enchants with the Binding of Mastery or etc. for your rings, etc. So I'm thinking that this situation is intended, but I don't have access to the alpha myself at the moment, so I don't really have any concrete data or more information on what the situation is. If anybody out there listening does have the alpha, would be like to get involved in checking out some information. I'd love to hear what kind of data you guys can get on that, because it would be nice to be able to just mass produce Expulsum on any character. So for example, if you had tailoring, you could just mass produce your bracers again, but instead of having to disenchant them, you can just send them off to another character to put into the scrapper and generate some Expulsum there. So yeah, instead of just being limited on one character, one profession, you can spread your Expulsum around, even though they're bind on pickup. So next mini section in here, then Warcraft developer Twitter feed has confirmed that First Aid is being removed. There was a question asked whether recipes from previous expansions would need to be relearned, but they've confirmed that they do not need to be relearned if you don't, or if you already have them rather, with the exception of First Aid. So, oops. If you have any tailoring and alchemy crafts, bandages and anti-venoms that used to be in First Aid, they will have to be relearned. Because First Aid is being folded into tailoring, and the First Aid profession itself is going to be removed from the game. So any achievements or anything that you want to catch up on should be done before Battle for Azeroth. And with that in mind, it also confirms that you do get to keep the recipes and patterns from previous expansions. And if you don't have them, and you don't have the points to get up to that point for those particular expansions, you will need to level those up to be able to learn those recipes with the required skill points. So that's my thinking, that profession leveling kits might make a comeback. That was a very popular thing in Draenor and in Mists of Pandaria, where people needed to level their professions and they didn't want to spend the time acquiring all the materials.
I know a buyer when I see one.
Or figuring out what they needed to do in order to level their profession. So as goblins and gold makers, we can prepare all of that stuff for them and charge a set fee or set rate to trade the materials and
have a deal for you.
Give them an idea of how to level up those professions the most efficient way. So definitely keep an eye out on that. There's some great guides on the internet and in the WoW economy subreddit regarding professional leveling kits. We'll probably see a comeback of those. Let's see here. So next section there is I can't get rid of that. Let me just turn off alerts for now. Bear with me one moment, guys. There we go. So next section there is new weapons and enchants have been discovered on the alpha. Some of these weapons are crafted by professions. Engineering creates some of these wrench-looking things. Look pretty awesome. There's a couple of dual crafting weapons here as well that seem to be crafted by the dual crafting profession. So these got nice big gems in them. I'm not sure whether these are going to be stuff you just level your profession with, or if they're just some unique appearances that are only available to the profession user, i.e. if you craft these weapons it might only be bind on pickup or something. Not sure what these particular items are. However, two new enchants have also been discovered, kind of calling back to the old vanilla Bubble and Hearth Paladin. Cooled Hearthing, enchanting bracers, reduce the cooldown of your Hearthstone by 5 minutes while you're in Kulturas or Zandalar, and also Safe Hearthing, create an absorb shield around you while you're using your Hearthstone on Kulturas or Zandalar. So you can't have both of these. It's going to be a one or the other situation for your bracers. And the discussion points for this particular section, just regarding if anybody has been doing the shuffling, the Obliterum shuffle in Legion, and what you guys think about the Scrapper and whether it's going to make a big impact on professions in Battle for Azeroth. And also just mentioning the fact that there are some first aid achievements. If any of you guys are waiting to do that, you better do that before Battle for Azeroth, because the profession is going to be removed. So good time to catch up on that. So let's just catch up on a couple of questions here. Only found fishing and cooking. There's no herbs or skinnable mobs yet in the alpha. Not that you found, Billis. And you can't really craft anything. Okay. Well, hopefully some more things will get introduced. Obviously it is still an alpha. It's not quite into the beta yet. We'll have to see what else gets introduced. But yeah, unfortunately, as I say, I don't have access myself. Waiting for that invite for sure. So, next section on the blog this week, we have Mocha Boys from the subreddit, who's been recently titled a Trusted Goblin. He's been helping out the community quite a lot, posting some great insights, great guides, and posting helpful information. And this week he's put together a post regarding his start on a low population server, answering a question that he got sent regarding how to start on a low population server. And I think this question comes up quite often. Oh, I made a typo in my tweet, that's unfortunate. But yeah, low population server, it occurs in my chat quite regularly on stream here. What do I do to make gold? How do I start on a low population server? The economy is terrible, nothing sells, nothing is profitable. But my personal opinion, there's no such thing as a bad server to make gold on. You just have to kind of adapt your strategies and be aware of your server and adjust things accordingly. So Mocha Boy started off with some caveats on his post here, just giving some kind of background information on where he started. Somebody who was mentoring him when he started said they had over 17 million gold on their server, which is definitely achievable. He seems to suggest, or he does suggest rather, that most of the gold making goblins on a lot of servers do have an army of alts, or at least alts that cover all the different kinds of professions, which I do agree with. That's how I make my gold as well, even on a high pop server. Having lots of alts to utilize different professions is a great place or great position to be in. Also suggesting that it's not something that happens overnight, which is obviously very true. It's a very long-term strategy. You don't just suddenly decide that you want to be a gold maker and then the following day that you're running around with millions and millions of gold. You have to put in some time and effort and research. So yeah, that's obviously something to be aware of. Mocha Boy said his goals were modest. He wanted enough gold to buy anything he needed without having to think about it, and didn't want to spend any more time that was necessary maintaining a gold production routine. So he's not getting himself into a situation where I want to start making gold, I want 10 million gold, let's do this in a week. It's not going to happen. You need to be like realistic with what your objectives and expectations are. So he goes then on to answer some of the questions that were directed towards him. Main part of the question was, what is the trick to approaching such an economy, i.e. low population, as somebody new to the server? So the crux of it is just basically spending time observing, researching, checking out the high frequency items on sites like the Undermine Journal and Trade Skill Master. Obviously you're looking more at current content stuff. You mentioned Saber's Eye gems, Argus gems, Primal Obliterum, Enchanting, Hexweave bags, all the stuff that's going to be selling super frequently. You don't really want to be sitting on any stock for too long. You don't want to tie up all your gold and stuff in items that are just going to sit in the mailbox or sit on the auction house, etc. Then you're suggesting, if you don't have anything at all and you're just wanting to start off, this is something I always suggest as well, is just picking up a few gathering professions and literally farming your stuff out of the ground, like mining or herbalism, skinning, etc. And just do that for a few hours every other day, and by the end of a week or two you're going to have 100,000 gold plus just from selling that stuff on the auction house without any real consideration of market values and stuff like that, because obviously that kind of thing comes with time. You don't just suddenly understand markets and price trends and stuff overnight, but as you're farming stuff you'll notice when prices change and you can decide if you want to wait for a day to sell it or sell it in the trade chat, etc. But yeah, just going out and collecting materials and selling them without doing anything with them is a great starting point for a lot of people. And obviously at the launch of Battle for Azeroth there's going to be an influx of demand for the new current content materials. So if you do have those gathering professions, you can cash in on spending a bit of time picking those up at the launch of Battle for Azeroth. As the demand completely skyrockets, people are going to be paying lots and lots of gold for those mats in the opening weeks, so you can definitely capitalize on that. He then just progresses on talking about expanding into different markets, all about diversification, which is something that we teach here on the stream quite frequently. You don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. If you do identify something that is profitable, don't just put all of your gold into it. You need to make sure that you can sustain that and then do other things and investigate other markets, etc. So he personally started doing buying down equipment and gear from raids and stuff like that, especially Twink stuff for the level 101 stuff. He's done food, cooking, feasts, he's done flask from alchemy, all of which he said he didn't continue doing because they weren't very profitable for him. So obviously this is situations where you're not always going to be making the right call. You're going to be learning about your server's market and deciding what is good for you personally. And it's not a case of failing at this point, it's just learning a lesson and experiencing something that you can then apply to your next decision and next call regarding your gold making strategy. So what he ended up finishing up with was jewel crafting, enchanting, primal obliterum shuffles, and flipping items like medallions of the Legion. People definitely want to get their reputations up by whatever means necessary, and that applies to all expansions. So if there's any kind of items like this in the next expansion where you can boost reputations, then those are always going to be valuable to players and worthwhile investigating. So the next part of the question that he was answering talks about crafting. Seems completely unprofitable, and this statement is never ever true on any server. It doesn't matter which kind of population or which kind of server you're on. Professions are always going to have some kind of profitable aspect to it. That's why I personally always encourage people to have at least one of each profession as a gold maker. So that whenever you find an opportunity, you can get involved and craft something and sell it without having to scramble to level it up, etc. And obviously, professions aren't restricted to current content crafts. That's why he suggests focusing on current content at the beginning while you're starting out, especially on a low pop server, because this kind of thing will be a little bit more in demand and selling a bit more frequently. So he mentions things like the jewel crafting crowns, leatherworking shoulder pads, tailoring items, leveling those things up, and the Argus gems from jewel crafting. But yeah, his primary method is, as he said, primal obliterum, which he can utilize from different professions. So either he's taking the gems or he's taking crafted items to obliterate and then upgrading them to primal obliterum. So yeah, obviously there's not as much of access to old school content from previous expansions on those low pop servers, but if you can start utilizing those kind of things do get dismissed by people because they think it's not relevant, and that's generally not the case. There's still interesting things to craft from previous expansions. So next part of the question was just talking about buying things in bulk, which is obviously a little bit more of a high population mechanic or situation. Obviously there's a lot more materials available on higher population servers, but if you're on a low pop server, perhaps you can strike a deal with somebody who is out farming. You can buy the stuff directly without having to think about waiting for the price to drop on the auction house. You can set something up. If some people just aren't interested in dealing with the auction house, you can contact them directly and say, look, I'll be quite prepared to buy your stuff directly. Just send it cash on delivery or contact me by Whisper if you have any stock available, and then you can keep your prices consistent. Be aware of how much gold you're spending on that. Yeah, so too long didn't read for this part. Using gathering professions to begin with, just to collect some capital to start utilizing. And then once you start getting a little bit of gold behind you, you can start buying and selling stuff on the auction house, and then invest in some professions perhaps after that point. So yeah, just to kind of take some key points away, be patient is one of the main things. As he said, it definitely doesn't happen overnight. I feel like there's a myth amongst people who don't get involved in gold making as kind of a priority, that there's only one thing that people who make gold do, and that they do that one thing to make lots and lots of gold, and that simply is not the case. It's all about diversification and being in as many markets as possible. The more things you're doing, or the more things you're selling, then the more revenue you're making and the more profits you're making. Be ready to adapt is another important thing. If you are just focusing on one or two things and suddenly there's a hot fix that changes how those markets work, you could be suddenly stuck with a lot of stock or a lot of items that are suddenly no longer worth anything, or the market might suddenly trend downwards and crash in terms of pricing on your server. So as the same thing as before, don't put all of your eggs in one basket. You've got to diversify a little bit and try different professions or different markets out. There's no such thing as a one get-rich-quick scheme or method. You have to be prepared to follow your markets and adjust your pricing and stuff. Don't try and be stubborn about things and wait for prices to rise if it's not going to happen. It's important to be realistic as well. Mocha Boys mentioned his goals and objectives were modest, and I think that is something that's important, especially if you're just starting out. You don't want to start out saying, I want to make 10 million gold. I mean, you might do. That might be the ultimate goal. But you've got to set yourself smaller, achievable goals to begin with. Before you get to that major milestone of 10 million, you might say, hey, I want to be able to purchase a vial of the sands, or I might want to be able to cover my repair costs for my raiding this week or something. Just something that is, is going to be achievable without having to completely take over the auction house kind of thing. Also important to not assume anything. This is especially true for the statement that crafting is not profitable. As I say, that is never the case. There's always something you can do with a profession that's going to be a profitable thing. Don't dismiss something yourself just because it's not relevant to you personally. Somebody might be interested in buying it. Somebody might have some kind of requirement for this particular item that you can craft. So you might as well put it on the auction house, see if it sells. If it does sell, you can make another one, or you can go and farm another one and then do it again. So that's kind of the starting point and introduction to getting started on a low pop server. You might have some different experiences on your servers if you've just started getting into gold making. I'd be curious to hear your guys' experience there. If there anybody is listening in from the Wowhead page and is just starting to get into gold making, do come and click through onto my stream and let me know what you've been up to and what your experiences have been. Be catching up with chat here in a second once we've covered the discussion points.
You break it, you buy it.
Yeah, if you are on a low population server, what has been your go-to strategies for gold making, and how has your gold making been since you've started it? And if you are still on a lower population server, have you ever considered moving to a high pop server, and what happened there? How's it going, Clayton? Killbreath as well. Roho, how you guys doing? But yeah, we're just going through my first opening segment of my stream on Saturdays. I'll be talking through my blog because we are currently embedded on the homepage of Wowhead, so I'd like to be able to talk through the blog and answer any questions, etc. Lucky Gnome says, I need 300,000 gold in 4 days for a token. I'm on a high pop server, what should I do? Yeah, there's lots of different options for you there, Lucky Gnome, but we'll continue with the blog and we'll have a chat about that after getting through the this week's WoW Economy weekly wrap up. Only 30 minutes late. Yeah, what's up everybody? So next section in the blog this week, there's a great video from Sharkin. I think I need to reference his YouTube channel here. But he talks about what to do when you're stumbling across a recipe or a pattern and you're investigating whether you should learn it or whether you should sell it for a bit of gold. Obviously different situations on what your current setup is and what is appropriate for you. But he kind of goes through very nicely and very well regarding different aspects you should consider, including checking out your current auction house. We're not going to watch the video on stream, but I just kind of reviewed it a little bit underneath the video embed. But yeah, checking your own auction out to see if anybody is listing the item that you craft with that recipe. If there's nobody crafting it and you don't see any data on the Undermine Journal or Wowhead, not Wowhead, but Trade Skill Master regarding anybody listing it, it might mean that there's nobody posting that item or crafting it on your server. So that could be a market that you could control yourself. You'd be the only one listing the item, so you'd have a complete monopoly on it. Quite often with the rare recipes, you're going to be the only one listing it. Since, as I said earlier, a lot of people dismiss those old recipes for being irrelevant, but they are having, or they do have some like unique transmog appearances or some niche utility in some situations. You also got to consider the materials that are required for the craft. Are they difficult to acquire? Like, would you be able to craft the item straight away, or would it require quite a bit of investment in being able to craft the item? Is it worth just selling the recipe at that point and letting somebody else deal with it? Because it's too much of a hassle to get those materials. Some of the times the materials are no longer available, or they're just too difficult to farm, or they're just never listed on the auction house. And if they are on the auction house, then they're just going to be too expensive. That's something to consider as well. One thing I have mentioned is that the good news is, if there is competition with these kind of crafted items from the old school expansions, chances are that those people crafting them are going to be utilizing and using Trade Skill Master, and hopefully they're going to have Trade Skill Master set up correctly, or at least set up sensibly. I shouldn't say correctly because there's no such thing as a correct TSM setup. But yeah, hopefully they're posting those kind of items at a sensible price, and a price that makes sense for you to get involved in that market as well. Having said that, if you're not really set up for professions and that's not really your thing, it's totally fine just to sell the recipes that you come across, and just generate a bit of gold for you that you can then reinvest into other things. Oh, that wouldn't have popped up, but thank you very much for the host, Shin. Much appreciated. Yeah, as I say, they're going to be a huge boost in liquidity that you can then invest in other things and other strategies to make gold with. Personally though, I'm very much a collector and a completionist with all my professions, so if there's any recipe and pattern that I pick up and I don't already know it, I'm just going to go ahead and learn it. It doesn't matter how much it's worth on the auction house or whether the crafted item is sellable. I just go ahead and pick it up and learn that recipe just to have it in my recipe book. So the discussion points for this particular section is, curious if you guys have ever had to decide on whether you should learn or sell a particular recipe, and what the outcome of that decision was, and what is the most expensive recipe you've ever purchased, or most valuable recipe you've ever acquired maybe, and did you make your money back from selling that crafted item if you did decide to buy something like that. Yeah, recipe book with 2 U's, exactly. So let's catch up in the chat here a sec. How's it going, Shin? Thank you so much for the host. Very much appreciated. Rojo says, told me to get the Low Walker's reputation for your archaeology for file, and I really appreciate it because listening to Low Walker Joe's stories was one of the most rewarding things I've done in a while. And it only took me less than an evening. Oh, that's fantastic to hear, Rojo. It is a very interesting storyline there, and it is eventually the most efficient way to do your archaeology for the Vial of the Sands recipe. That's the method that I use myself, and it was well worth it in the end. Sharken's doing a 24-hour stream. Okay, that sounds good. Less competition means I control the price. Yeah, exactly. It's Amanza, or it's Samanza. As I say, if there's nobody listing those items for the old school recipes, chances are you're going to be able to be the only one listing, and you get to control the price, of course. So, next and final section of this week's Wowhead blog for the WoW Economy Weekly Wrap-Up. Just covering a couple of videos that have been posted, one from Trax and then one from Samadan. Just covering a few different auction house strategies. First one being about stack sizes, which is something we've discussed here on the stream quite frequently. Being able to post in multiple varying stack sizes. Obviously, again, we're not going to watch the whole video, but the link or the embed is there on the blog itself if you guys want to watch it. Posting at multiple stack sizes is dubbed or often called pretty stacking or neat stacking. Nobody generally wants to spend their time purchasing hundreds of single items off the auction house. Of course, that's not a big deal if the price is nice and you have Trade Skill Master installed. So the idea is that you collect whatever stock you have or whatever inventory you have of those materials and post them in convenient stack sizes for other players to purchase. You can often charge a premium or charge more per unit than you would otherwise be able to if you were just simply listing it at the lowest price, i.e. undercutting the cheapest auction. It doesn't often make sense to undercut an individual Starlight Rose on the auction house with your premium stack of 200, especially if the individual Starlight Rose is listed considerably lower than the general value or the general worth of that item. people will often pay a premium or a convenience fee in quotes to get the larger stack size of an item that you're selling, just because it's posted at a bigger stack size. And this is what I call overcutting, or what is called overcutting. Instead of undercutting the cheapest auction, you're actually posting higher than the lowest buyout, and even above the market value in some cases. This is something that I personally utilize in selling my consumables from alchemy. So my flasks, instead of undercutting the cheapest auction, I will go ahead and list my flasks at a slightly higher price in different stack sizes, as long as there's nobody else listing those items at that price point. People that want to buy the number that I post, i.e. stacks of 3 or stacks of 4, they're going to find those items on the auction house, and it doesn't matter how much they are compared to the cheapest, they're just going to go ahead and buy those individual auctions, not individual, but the stacks of 3 and 4, because that's how much they need. And because of that, it's worth keeping in mind that a lot of people who are purchasing your auctions, they don't necessarily have any auction house add-ons, like Trade Skill Master or Auctionator, etc. So that means that they don't have any means to determine if they're buying the cheapest auction. They don't have any concept of market value for an item. They don't understand whether something is purchased above or below market value. They just see what they need and they buy it. So something could be listed at like 250% higher than what it normally is, but it's an amount that they need, so they're just going to go ahead and buy it. So you'll often see the case where people are buying enchants, or they're buying flasks like thousands of gold more expensive than the cheapest, but it's posted at a stack size that the purchaser wants, so therefore they're just going to go ahead and buy it. So yeah, that's obviously something very much so to keep in mind. I can see Jack getting his 5 minutes of fame. So last section of this topic, we've got Samadan, who's another gold making streamer. He's another chilled out stream and broadcaster. But Samadan's put together a great video regarding the Trade Skill Master group maker and group creator, and you can utilize this tool along with Wowhead itself to search and filter for items that you can then add into your groups for Trade Skill Master. So it's quite important in a lot of cases to be quite granular with your groups, and being able to assign specific operations to different kind of items, so you can have much better control on your pricing in terms of whether you're buying something or selling something on the auction house. So again, we're not going to watch the whole video, it's there on the blog to get caught up with. And just finishing off that bit there with the link to the TSM group maker, which is on tradeskillmaster.com. His whole video guide goes through how to utilize this, filtering your items on Wowhead and then copy and pasting, etc. But there's also a nice list of popular groups that people have created on tradeskillmaster.com, including transmog items, crafting materials, battle pets, transmog from Reckles from Want to Buy Gold, BOE items from Antaurus, more materials, twink items, Legion glyphs, all that kind of stuff. All these groups that are pre-made and ready to import into Trade Skill Master. This is something that the guys on the TSM team would like to kind of expand upon and be a little bit more of an integral part of the website. But that's something for the future, I think, because right now obviously we're all very much getting through the Trade Skill Master 4 beta, so there's going to be some more updates for that very soon as well. We've got lots of new features to add and carry forward from TSM 3, and obviously lots of bugs and issues to squash before the full release of the add-on. So discussion points there for this topic. Do you ever do any overcutting? Do you ever do any pretty stacking? How has that worked out for you? Have you ever noticed anybody paying above the odds and above the market value for your items when you've been overcutting? And just a random fun question to ask: how many Trade Skill Master groups do you have if you do utilize Trade Skill Master? I think I personally wouldn't be able to count all of mine. But yeah, if you do have some kind of count, I'd be curious to hear. So yeah, that wraps up this week's WoW Economy weekly blog covering the gold making community. There's a link to catch up with all of this in the chat. There's a new version or a new edition every Saturday, and obviously leading this week with the speculation on the scrapper. It would be very, very interesting if how I am interpreting this does get carried onto live servers, and being able to scale up your professions, crafting and stuff. Oh, there's Samadan in the chat now. How's it going, Samadan? Do appreciate you stopping by. So yeah, I think the scrapper is going to be very cool. As soon as I get access into the beta, or rather the alpha, this will be the first thing I'm going to test. But yeah, if any of you guys listening do already have access, it'd be really cool to get any data that you might have or might be able to acquire. So that does wrap up the first segment of the stream. If any of you guys listening in or watching on wowhead.com or on my blog post, do feel free to click through onto the stream itself and come and say hello in the chat. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions. I will be paying a lot more attention to the chat now, now that we've finished chatting through this week's blog. But I do appreciate you tuning in and hanging out with us for the first hour of today's stream. I'm going to be streaming for a few more hours, but I am going to be removing the embed from the wowhead.com homepage. It is going to continue to live on the blog post itself. So if you are listening along on the homepage of Wowhead and you'd like to continue, do come and join us on Twitch. Click onto the channel itself and come and join the chat. Let me just save this post here.